So let's talk about 2008. If you walked into the DreamWorks campus back then, you'd see a studio that was basically on top of the world. They had Shrek, they had Kung Fu Panda, they knew how to make hits. But inside the walls, there was this quiet, growing panic about a project called How to Train Your Dragon. The directors, Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois, had a vision that honestly sounded like a nightmare for the tech team. They didn't want magic dragons. They didn't want these creatures to feel like floaty, magical beasts that fly just because the script says they can. They wanted them to feel like heavy, dangerous, 2-ton animals. In the early animation tests, the dragons looked like cartoons. They were swimming through the air. There was no weight, no tension. If a dragon turned, it just slid through the air, like a cursor on a computer screen. Dean DeBlois famously looked at the team and said, "If I don't feel like I'm going to die when that dragon dives, we've failed." That was the spark. They realized that their artists, as brilliant as they were, didn't actually understand how air worked. They were drawing magic, but the movie needed mechanics. And that's when they did something insane. They opened a flight school. This wasn't some weekend seminar. They brought in actual flight physicists, the kind of people who usually work for Boeing. These guys told the animators, "Stop thinking about dragons as mythical beasts. Think of them as aircraft." The first thing they taught them was that air is a character. In most movies, air is just empty space. But in flight school, the animators were taught that air is more like a thick, invisible syrup. To move through it, you have to push it out of the way. They spent weeks studying the P-51 Mustang, a legendary World War II fighter jet. Why a jet? Because a Mustang is a heavy aircraft. It has a massive engine and a lot of momentum. It doesn't just zip around. It has to bank. It has to roll. It has to struggle against its own weight. The instructors told the animators, "Toothless is a P-51. He's powerful, but he's heavy. If he makes a turn, I want to see his muscles tensing. I want to see the wingtips vibrating, because the air is trying to rip them off." This changed everything. Suddenly, the animators weren't just drawing a cool dragon. They were thinking like pilots. They realized that cool movement isn't about what the dragon wants to do. It's about what the air lets him do. But a dragon isn't just a plane made of metal. It's a beast. So, the second phase of flight school moved from the airfield to the animal kingdom. They Frankensteined the dragon's movement from the most unlikely places. First stop, the ocean. Think about a great white shark. Water is just a denser version of air. The animators realized that a bird's tail is mostly for steering, but a shark's tail is the engine. It's where all the thrust comes from. If you watch Toothless in the movie, especially when he's hovering, his tail is moving in that powerful side-to-side S curve. By giving him a shark's tail, he suddenly felt 5 times heavier and 10 times more dangerous. Then, they looked at bats. Most movie dragons have wings that look like leather umbrellas. But the flight school instructors pointed out that in nature, wings are sophisticated hands. They noticed that when a bat flies, its skin doesn't stay flat. It ripples. It catches the wind like a sail on a boat. The tech team at DreamWorks actually wrote a brand new piece of code just to simulate wind on skin. When Toothless is diving at 100 miles per hour, you can see the skin between his wing bones vibrating violently. That vibration is a physics cue. Your brain sees that tiny flutter and thinks, "Wow, he's going fast." They even looked at black panthers. They wanted the dragon to have that heavy feline slouch when he was on the ground. They learned that by putting the weight in the shoulders, the transition from the ground to the air felt like a massive event. You could see the dragon loading its muscles before it exploded into the sky. But the real final boss of flight school was the interaction between the dragon and the boy. If a human sits on a creature flying that fast, the wind resistance alone would rip them off. The animators had to learn about G-forces. They started putting those details into Hiccup. When they're flying fast, Hiccup isn't just sitting there looking cool. He's hunkered down, squinting his eyes against the wind. His hair is plastered to his forehead, and he's physically straining. They realized that the coolness of the flight didn't come from how easy it looked. It came from how hard it looked. They wanted you to see that flying a dragon was a physical workout. It was a sport. The ultimate test of flight school was the prosthetic tail. Since Toothless lost half his tail, he's basically an airplane with a broken rudder. In a normal cartoon, he'd just fly a bit wobbly. But because these guys were now amateur pilots, they treated that tail like a mechanical repair on a broken aircraft. Every time Hiccup clicks that foot pedal, he's changing what pilots call the angle of attack. The animators had to time Hiccup's hand movements perfectly with the dragon's struggle. If the tail fin is at the wrong angle, the dragon doesn't just fly weird, he stalls. He loses lift and starts to fall. When you see Hiccup and Toothless tumbling through the clouds in that test drive scene, they aren't just falling for drama. They're falling because the physics of their aircraft stopped working. By the time the movie hit theaters, the industry was stunned. It didn't look like Shrek or Toy Story. It had grit. Even real-world pilots reached out to the studio to say, "I don't know how you did it, but that felt like flying." They recognized the way the wind buffeted the wings. The legacy of flight school changed everything. It set a new standard for the whole industry. Now, when we see a creature fly in a big blockbuster, we expect to see that weight. We expect to see the wind pulling at the wings. DreamWorks proved that if you want your audience to believe in something impossible, like a boy riding a dragon, you have to respect the rules of the real world. They had to learn how to fly, so that for 90 minutes, we could feel like we were up there with them. Next time you watch that movie, look at the way Toothless banks into a turn. Look at the way his wings vibrate. You're not just watching animation. You're watching a bunch of artists who spent months learning how to be pilots just so they could take you for a ride. And honestly, that's a pretty good reason to go to school.